right now there's a requirement to get almost any legislation done that you need to have 60 votes in the Senate. And we come up one vote short time after time after time. So it really matters. And making that connection for people and listening to what they have to say about what their concerns are, about why they're not voting, and how we can make things work in a way that encourages people to vote is something that everyone who's in elective office needs to work harder on.
Hi, my name is Owen, and welcome to Youth in the Booth. Today, I have a very special guest, United States Senator from New Hampshire, Jeanne Shaheen. Welcome to the podcast.
So great to be with you. I'm excited that you're talking to young people about the importance of voting. We have a big election coming up. There's a lot at stake, and I hope that everyone who is 18 will make their voices heard.
I hope so as well. I actually just voted in our primary.
All right, good.
Yeah. I'd love to start with a question about your job that you have right now in the United States Senate, and talk about some aspects of being a senator that people don't usually talk about, and what are the qualities you need to do those positions?
One of the things that I think is really important about the work that we do in our Senate office is what we call constituent services. So if somebody has a problem with the federal government, they can't get their Social Security check, or they're a veteran and they have medals that they've earned that they never received, or if someone has an issue with Medicare, they call our office and we can help them with federal agencies. And for so many people, this is a difference that we can make in their lives that, and for many people, probably has more to do with how they're doing than almost any law that we could pass in Washington. And I think that's an aspect of our work that a lot of people don't realize is going on. And we have a very robust staff of constituent services folks who have been there. Most of them have been there as long as I have. And they work really hard on behalf of people in New Hampshire. So when there was a housing crisis after the financial debacle in 2008, we helped keep people in their homes, kept them from being foreclosed on. When people have issues with not concern about their rent, or whether they can get fuel assistance, they can call our office and we can try and help. And in order to do that, we need people who are persistent, who are dedicated, who are empathetic, who understand the challenges that people face every day. And I think that is one of the aspects of my work as a senator that I am not only most proud of, but most committed to.
Yeah, serving the people in ways maybe in the back. And obviously, it's not just you. You have an amazing staff around you.
I do. I have a great staff.
Right, and that's always.
And your mother is a former staffer, so
Yes.
She knows exactly how important all this work is.
I know. I've always heard stories about the work and the time that it takes to, work for someone who's high up positions in power, and that it's a team effort, it's a group, and that people might acknowledge that there is a person in front who represents, but there's also the many, many individuals in the back who keep the cogs going and keep the people of New Hampshire well and safe. Exactly.
Absolutely. And, I understand that you're only as effective as the people who work with you are. So as you say, we have a great team and everybody is very committed and works very hard.
It's amazing. I'd like to ask a question because we're talking about, young people at the very beginning of this, like myself. I'm part of Gen Z. I just turned 18, and I see a lot of people around me who are incredibly passionate about issues in this country, but they don't turn out to vote. The voting block from 18 to 21, especially even to 30, is the lowest percentage of people who vote. What do you might think might help to solve this issue for people who feel passionate about what's going on in our country, but aren't actually going to the polls?
It's a real dilemma. And, I spent several years as the director of the Institute of Politics at the Kennedy School at Harvard, working with young people. And the mission of the Institute of Politics is to try and encourage young people to get involved in politics and public service. And it's something that I think is so important. And often, as you point out, young people don't make the connection between what they feel passionate about and the ability of government and politics to make a difference on that issue. And I think about my own experience. I came of age during the Vietnam War, during the Civil Rights Movement. And one of the things that helped motivate my generation was trying to get the voting age reduced from 21 down to 18, because our argument was you can be called up to go fight in Vietnam, but you don't have the right to vote. And that was a very direct connection that we could see between an issue that we cared about and the ability to make a difference through the political process. Mm-hmm. And so I think we need to point that out, whether it's, driving and getting your license and laws around driving, or going to college, or being an apprentice, or buying a house, investing, putting money in the bank. All of that is governed by our laws and by the political process. And so helping people understand that their vote really does matter, it really does make a difference, is absolutely critical.
Yeah. And, you're talking about it in your generation, at your times, that there was a lot of sparks for action and civic engagement. Do you feel confident about the new generation of people coming up to have that same type of passion and interest? Do you have any hope for what's happening with young voters?
Well, I think, as you point out, the passion and interest is there. What needs to happen is that people need to be motivated to actually go out and vote. And I think one way to do that is to talk to young people, to talk to people about the difference that they make in the process, to talk to them about why it's important to vote. One of the Robert Costa has a new book out about the 1960 presidential election between John Kennedy and Richard Nixon. And one of the things I remember hearing from my parents about that election was that just one vote in every precinct in Pennsylvania would have changed the outcome of that election, that Richard Nixon would have won instead of John Kennedy. And we have all kinds of examples that show what a difference one vote can make. Certainly it's true in the Senate. Right now there's a requirement to get almost any legislation done that you need to have 60 votes in the Senate. And we come up one vote short time after time after time. So it really matters. And making that connection for people and listening to what they have to say about what their concerns are, about why they're not voting, and how we can make things work in a way that encourages people to vote is something that everyone who's in elective office needs to work harder on.
Exactly. It's not just a drop of water in the pool. It's so much more than that. And
absolutely.
I think there's at least what I see, there's this distance between, maybe through age, through ideals, through people who are in positions of power right now, and young people. And that bridge needs to be formed.
Yeah, for sure. I have a number of grandchildren, and several of them are voting. Well, one of my grandsons has voted for the first time this year. Like you, he voted in the primary. He's going to vote in the general election. And he was very excited about voting. And we need to make sure that people have that excitement. My view is you should graduate with a diploma in one hand and a voter registration card in the other, that we should make it easier for young people to get out and register to vote.
Exactly. How about your grandchildren voting for the first time? What about when you voted for the first time? What was that type of experience?
Well, as I said, I was in college during the Vietnam War, and I remember voting for the first time in 1968. And I voted absentee because my family lived in West Virginia and I was going to college in Pennsylvania. So I can remember very clearly filling out that form and voting for president. And that was a really close election between Richard Nixon and Hubert Humphrey. I have to admit, I voted for Richard Nixon. I would not vote for him again today, but I did at that time. And mostly over Vietnam, because there was people who research this will go back and know that Richard Nixon said he had a plan to end the war in Vietnam. And for those of us who thought the war should end, we believe that he had a plan. Sadly, it didn't pan out that way. And of course, I did not vote for him again in 1972 when he ran for re-election. But it's, again, an indication of the fact that our views change as we get involved in the political process. We see whether our vote produced the outcome that we had intended. And if it didn't, we have the opportunity to go change our vote and to try something else.
I know. And I want to say there's that divisiveness now in our country, and how close elections can be in many, many states, including here in New Hampshire, that your one vote means so much and could make a complete difference.
Absolutely. And all of the polls show that at the national level and in New Hampshire, that the race for president is too close to call. It's within the margin of error. The governor's race in New Hampshire between Kelly Ayotte and Joyce Craig is within the margin of error. It's too close to call. And there are a lot of state Senate and House races in New Hampshire that are up for grabs that are really important. And I would encourage people who are going to vote to not just vote for the top of the ticket, but to go right down the ballot and vote for every office, because every office is really important. What happens in government is going to affect your life, even though you think it may not. And so who gets elected is really important.
Exactly. Especially people who are local, who do local things for you and your family and the community around you, could do more impact than someone at the top of the ballot.
Absolutely. Sometimes that is absolutely critical.
Exactly. Hey, I think that might be all the time we have today, but I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It means the absolute world to me.
Well, thank you, Owen, and thank you for all of your efforts to try and encourage young people to get out and vote. It really does matter, and we need to listen to what young voters have to say, and we need to respond and try and address the concerns that they express.
Hey, it's Owen. I'm going to do a little outro real quick at the end here to kind of explain the time I've been off. So, first off, I voted for the first time, as was explained in the podcast episode with the senator, and it was a great experience. I have never felt a sense of duty like that before to my own country. And it was, something I've been waiting to do for a very long time. I have this passion for politics and getting people out to vote. And, all this time I've been talking about the importance of voting without actually being able to vote myself. But to have that experience was incredible and very much what I was hoping for. But there's not a lot of time before the general election. And my original goal of this podcast was to have everything done. But I don't think I'm going to be able to finish before the November election because there's a lot more stories to tell. I set out a mission to create a podcast that helps, open up the curtains of how our political system works, to give education and understanding to young people, but of anyone who's interested in how America is run. The people who are politicians themselves, the people who work on their campaigns or work for politicians, people who run campaigns, people who are advocates of different issues in our country, people who are journalists and want to tell the stories of America. I have more to tell people, and I want to continue. So there is many more episodes on the rise. Do not worry. But as was also spoke about in my interview with the senator, that things are very divisive in our country today. It is difficult to find a middle ground for many Americans on issues. And I want to make sure with my podcast that as it is nonpartisan, to also bring a tying together of people to show that you don't have to fundamentally agree with someone to at least understand where their side is coming from. And that will continue to be a goal of the podcast in the future with everything I do and everything I stand for. So this is just a little update at the end. I had an amazing time talking with the senator. I'm very honored to be able to do that. And there will be more episodes coming out soon. Do not worry. Owen out.